Chapter 3 of Wuthering Heights. If you haven't watched my other videos, don't worry, you really haven't missed much. I love this story, but it does take some time to get started. Basically, what we know is our narrator is Mr. Lockwood. He's posh and somewhat clueless and overly curious. He's renting a house called Thrushcross Grange, and he's all excited about his new digs, and so he wants to visit his neighbor and landlord, Mr. Heathcliff. Heathcliff lives at Wuthering Heights. We also meet this very grumpy servant named Joseph, although he's not nearly as grumpy as Heathcliff, who gives our narrator a cold shoulder. But our narrator is determined to befriend Heathcliff, and so at the end of his visit, he promised to visit the next day, even though it's pretty clear Heathcliff does not want him to come back. Hence the reason I think he's pretty clueless. So Lockwood goes back the next day, but this time things are a little bit worse. He meets this mysterious woman, Mrs. Heathcliff, and a young man named Hareton Earnshaw. With the help of these new characters, Mr. Lockwood figures out very quickly that Wuthering Heights is not a place to go for friendly chat and tea. All right, so now you're caught up. Because Lockwood didn't know how to tell that there was a storm coming when he visited the Heights, he's stuck there for the night. The housekeeper puts him in a room she knows no one is supposed to be in, and one she believes is haunted, and she really wants to find out if it is. The room contains an oak case that is sort of shaped like a coach. You can go into it, close it, and have privacy to read, sleep, or whatever. Like his bad decision to go to the Heights in a snowstorm, he decides to climb into the case for a slumber. Inside the case, there are a bunch of books, and the names Catherine Earnshaw, Catherine Heathcliff, and Catherine Linton are scratched all over the inside. What's not clear is this the same person, or are these three different people? I guess Lockwood likes to read, so he just kept reading these three names over and over again until he fell asleep. And then he wound up dreaming with these names swirling around in his head, only to wake suddenly with some kind of fear and fright from these names swirling around in his head. So he decides to read himself to sleep, something other than these names. He looked at all the books, and they were all Catherine Earnshaw's books from 25 years ago. Can you imagine how musty that must smell inside that oak case? He finds Catherine's diary, and it has a caricature of Joseph in it. The entry below the picture is an entry soon after her father's death. From this entry, we learn that Catherine's brother, Hindley, now runs the house after his father's death, and he's really mean to Heathcliff. Oh, is this the very gruff Heathcliff who's Lockwood's landlord? Hindley is married, no mention of their mother. Joseph, that very grumpy old man we've already met, doubles as a minister when they can't go to church, and from the diary entry we find out that he is long-winded and boring, and seems just as mean then as he does now. Hindley thinks their dad was too liberal with Heathcliff. He calls Heathcliff a vagabond, and won't let him live in the house anymore, or eat with them, or play with Catherine. All the things that they did when Daddy was alive. Brother says he will reduce Heathcliff to his rightful place. Now, this does seem to explain a little bit about Heathcliff's behavior, don't you think? Although it doesn't really explain the other people's behavior. Where is Catherine, Hindley, his wife, or their mother? None of this is explained yet, and unfortunately the diary entry is done. So then Lockwood moves on to something else. He finds a book, and he reads the title, 70 times 7 and the first of 71st, a pious discourse delivered by Reverend Jabez Branderham in the chapel of Gimmerden, Sow. Boy, what a title. He starts to nod off after reading the title, and I don't blame him. That was practically an entire book. He began to dream this crazy dream where he and Joseph went to Reverend Branderham's church for a nonsensical sermon that ended in a brawl. The Reverend began tapping loudly on the pulpit to stop the brawl, and that's when Lockwood woke up. He realized the tapping in his dream was actually the branch of a fir tree touching his lattice and rattled its dry cones against the pane. Then Lockwood fell back to sleep and began another dream. This time, the dream is even worse than the last one. A dream where he meets the ghost of Catherine, maybe Earnshaw, we don't know. She seems to be haunting the place for fun or spite, not sure which. In this dream, Lockwood finds himself in a very creepy version of Wuthering Heights, where everything is dark, mysterious, and uncomfortable. Okay, so maybe not quite as different as the one that we've been introduced to, but it does have some supernatural elements. Catherine is a ghostly figure tapping at his window like the Reverend was tapping in his last dream. Lockwood was freaked out, so he tries to leave, but the door is soldered shut. Even though this is a dream, he remembers his last dream where the tapping from the Reverend was actually a tree branch. So in his dream, he punches his hand through the glass to grab the branch to stop it. I'm not completely sure how grabbing the branch was going to stop the tapping unless he planned on either holding the branch through the entire dream or break it off. Although maybe breaking the window probably effectively stopped the tapping. When he reached out to grab the branch, he actually grabbed a young girl's hand instead. It was Catherine Linton, maybe, he's guessing. The Catherine ghost grabs his hand too and begs Lockwood to let her in. Lockwood is freaked out and tries to get rid of her. He tried to block her and told her he wouldn't let her in if she begged him for 20 years. Coincidentally, she said it has been 20 years. She's been homeless for 20 years. Half awake by now, he tried to get up, but his body wouldn't cooperate, and so he screamed out. Uh-oh, you woke up Mr. Heathcliff. Heathcliff is now going to be really irritated with him. Heathcliff insisted to know who put Lockwood in that room, and Lockwood threw Zillah, the maid, under the bus. Heathcliff was like, you might as well just finish out the night since you're here anyway, but never make that noise again. Lockwood, as you can imagine, said he was not going to stay in that room any longer. He insisted that the house was haunted, and specifically he insisted that there was this horrid ghost named Catherine in there. Oh, mouth, meat foot. Lockwood just remembered the connection between Catherine and Heathcliff from the diary. He tries to fix it, but only confused and annoyed Heathcliff. Really, by now it's too late for anybody to go back to sleep, so the two men decide to stay up. Lockwood says he's going to walk the grounds until the others wake and declares he is cured of wanting to be around other people. Lockwood left the room, but Heathcliff stayed. On his way out, he heard Heathcliff cry out for Catherine, begging her to come in. Lockwood could feel Heathcliff's anguish. Awkward is probably not a strong enough description of how Lockwood must have felt in this moment. So he then went to a room where he stretched out on a bench and a cat stretched out on the other one, until Joseph came in and ran the cat off. He then sat down on that bench and seemed really annoyed at Lockwood's presence. Soon Hareton came in. Lockwood said good morning to him, but Hareton didn't respond. Hareton was mumbling and cursing under his breath at everything he touched. He pointed to a door indicating that Lockwood should go in there. So Lockwood did, where he saw Zillah, Mrs. Heathcliff, and Heathcliff. Heathcliff was berating his daughter-in-law about something and looked like he was about to hit her, and it didn't look like the first time that had happened. But he stopped when he saw Lockwood enter. Lockwood skipped breakfast to get out of the house as quickly as possible. Heathcliff walked him across the moors, which Lockwood was happy about because the snow had made it difficult for him to tell at times where he was or where to go. They stopped about 2 miles from Thrushcross Grange, thinking he could easily find his way home at that point. Of course, he got lost many times, so it took him twice as long to get home. He got home around noon, which was about an hour for each mile between Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange, which is about 4 miles. The servants at the house were happy to see him as they were sure he had perished in the snow. Thanks so much for watching and listening. If you like this video or like what I do, be sure to subscribe for more videos.